The Minnesota Vikings matchup against the Los Angeles Rams just got a lot more interesting. We're going to break that down. We're going to talk about what the Rams look like, different from week 8. We're going to talk about some of the Vikings things from when I watched the film. And we have AJ Schulte, Rams expert from A to Z Sports, my coworker and friend, here to talk about the Rams and what to expect on Monday night. Welcome to the Real Forno Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Real Forno Show, hosted by the one and only Tyler Forness. A to Z Sports sought him out to be their Minnesota Vikings reporter and NFL analyst. And he's a proud contributor over at SKOL North's Purple Daily. Tyler is also the captivating host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, and a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Real Forno Show, starting just a little bit delayed tonight due to some technical issues. We're going to blame Odie for that. He farted in the computer. It was bad. My name's Tyler Forness. With me, as always, is producer Dave. He has parked himself in the bottom right corner today. You can't get me to get the right point, Dave. I'm going to get that every time now. Joining me to my left, Rams expert, O-line aficionado, and my good friend. He is AJ Schulte of A to Z Sports. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, man. How are you? We both managed to sneak into the playoffs this time.
Sneak in is just about right. You ended up having your team win the division, and the Vikings are the first ever 14-win team to not host a playoff game because, of course, they are. That is just the Vikings like, oh my God, Odie, you did it again. Ooh, boy. And that fart is kind of the stinky situation that we have in Southern California right now, because there are wildfires devastating the Los Angeles area, and we're going to start with that because it plays into this game. All of our thoughts, prayers, and good vibes are being sent to all those people, and hope that they're controlled quickly and everybody remains as safe as possible. But the wildfires could have a football problem for this game, meaning that the game could end up being moved. The NFL, just under an hour ago, released contingency plans where if they have to move this game due to safety and air quality concerns, it will be moved to Glendale, Arizona, where the Arizona Cardinals play, State Farm Stadium. Now, they hosted the Super Bowl 2 years ago. It is an A-plus facility, but that also provides a little bit of a problem because now the Rams don't get home field advantage. And AJ, the Rams are in a unique place because they are transplants from St. Louis. Yeah, they played in Los Angeles years ago, but as people I know that live in the Los Angeles area talk about, nobody's really from LA. They just moved to LA. So everybody kind of has their own allegiances. Will this impact the Rams much? How much of a home field advantage do they really have?
Yeah, every home game for the Rams has seemingly been an away game because everybody else's fans tend to travel to LA because it's LA. Like, of course, they're going to go to that kind of game. And Rams fans just don't. Like, they're like, I don't want to get out in LA traffic. I'm going to stay home, right? And it's so, like, from a fan perspective of, like, the crowd noise and everything like that, the Rams don't even have that at their own home games, right? Especially when they play the 49ers. Like, it's practically like you're playing in Santa Clara again. On the flip side of that equation, the last time the Rams had to go play in Arizona Stadium, they lost 41-10 in week 2 of the season. So it's a bit of a weird double-edged sword for the team. But over the last, really the end of the year, they've traveled particularly well. They beat the Seahawks on the road, the Patriots, Saints, 49ers, Jets, right? Like they closed the year strong on the road. And so I don't necessarily know if it's like this team is like starkly bad away from home, but will they miss out on having that kind of home field advantage? I don't really know if they had a big, strong one to begin with.
And I think that's what makes this very interesting from a gameplay perspective, Because if you were to say go to Philly or go to Green Bay, or even at this point go to Washington, because that fan base is revitalized tenfold, you're going to have a home field advantage in those places. But because because the Rams don't really have a home field advantage, it feels like that this is almost not much of a growth positive for the Vikings, because even now, one thing that's interesting, as we talked about at pre-show, is there are a lot of things called snowbirds. And snowbirds are people who live up at north and in the Midwest during the summer months, and they move down south during the winter months. Usually it's Florida, Texas, and Arizona. My grandma did the Arizona trip for 25 years before her Parkinson's ended up slowing her down too much. But that raises a really interesting idea: is, does this actually give the Vikings an advantage? And unless Vikings fans decide to make the trip and the Wilfs decide to pay for $2 million more in tickets, I don't know how much of an advantage it would give them.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of some statistics that we won't really know. I wouldn't be surprised if there were some people who are like, I don't want to go to California, but Arizona, I might, but also on the flip side, there might be people who go, oh, well, it's going to be moved. I don't want to have to bother with rearranging flights or anything like that, especially because they haven't officially made word yet on what that will look like. I wonder if, like, how much that will affect travel if people just like outright cancel and they just say, I don't want to risk it being canceled. There's a whole bunch of demographics and things at play, but I think by and large, hopefully, I think the biggest thing is that everybody makes it out safe and things like that. So we'll see how it plays out. The NFL is going to be absolutely, I think, on top of the ball, because they usually are in these kind of situations, especially when it comes to fan and most of the time player safety, aside from some of the issues in Brazil. But like this is a bit of a local issue, and hopefully everything turns out all right for everybody in the end.
No, I agree completely. Go ahead, David.
The Fires are 15 miles away from SoFi Stadium. But the biggest question is the people that support the stadium, be it the workers that put on the show, that they're affected. Now, there's also the idea of air quality, because SoFi is not an enclosed stadium. It's a stadium with a roof that floats over the top, and how that affects it. Do you feel that the NFL is eventually going to move it to Arizona because of air quality or whatever?
I definitely think that the fact that they were so quick to put out a contingency, I feel like they have already made plans. This sort of emergency response is pretty, I wouldn't say it obviously it's atypical, but they're used to it. They come up with contingency plans. That's half the point of why you have half the staff that you do in terms of like your front office, your administration, and why the NFL office is so large and you just qualified for their job. And a lot of people, like, the emergency risk is a significant part of event security. And so I definitely feel like they would have had a contingency plan ready to go. The fact that it came out so quickly and Arizona was like, yeah, we'll do it. Like that. I have a feeling this was ready as soon as they noticed these wildfires were getting bigger and becoming a more pressing matter than perhaps originally thought. I think they were like, okay, wait, we need to make a call and see what's going on. So I wouldn't be shocked if that ultimately happened, just so that it could be a quality environment overall, right? Just so there's no like lingering, like it might clear up by the time the game plays. We don't know for sure. Because you can't rely on a lot of projections that quickly, right? A lot of this stuff isn't going to just float away after a couple of days, and so I wouldn't be shocked if it was ultimately moved to Arizona. I would imagine that decision would have to come maybe tomorrow or probably at the latest Friday.
Okay, what is the weather forecast? Do you know?
I don't know.
I'm sure we could look it up here real quick, but even so, I do think what's really interesting about this, and look, we're strictly going to talk about this from a football perspective. There's so many other elements of humanity that we just hope everybody stays safe and this ends as soon as humanly possible. But all we can do other than send our best right now is talk about it from a football perspective, because we don't understand weather patterns like experts do. And we're just not in position, being where our geographic location is, where we can make that kind of impact. So we're just going to talk from a football perspective. I think what's interesting here is the NFL has some precedent, and I'm going to have to do some research here, because 2 years ago, they moved the Sunday game between the Bills and the Steelers to Monday night, I believe because of lake effect snow. And that element here is interesting. I think they waited until Friday to move that. I'm not 100% sure, because I mean, when we're talking about snow in Buffalo, you're not talking about 6 to 8 inches. You're talking about 16 to 30. And I think that provides an interesting blueprint here. Now, the game ended up being played. Everything ended up being peachy keen for both teams, but they did have to move it to like a 3:30 Central kickoff on Monday, which kind of ended up ruling, because then you got 3 straight doubleheaders. But being that this is a Monday game, they have extra time to play with. And I think that is a good thing here from that football perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of not fortunate timing, but the way that it ended up working out for them in terms of scheduling, with it being the Monday night game, I think gives them a lot more flexibility.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good way to frame it. It gives them the added flexibility, and because they already have this contingency plan in place, you would think that the people in the personnel departments for both teams already have travel arrangements started or even finalized by this point, because I guarantee you the Vikings and Rams were in on every single one of those discussions, so they knew what was going on. So if they have to flip it on a whim where, hey, they can wait until Saturday afternoon because they have everything already dialed in to make those decisions, I think they're going to try to do that. And as David Rinaldi points out, 700 is right now is the cheapest flight. Well, the Vikings and Rams will not fly on a standard plane. They have their own charters. So it makes things a little bit easier from that perspective, where all they have to do is show up and board the plane and they're done. That's it.
Well, unless you were the Chiefs last week who couldn't get off the runway.
No, but that is for
fans. Both in the game against Denver and also.
No, that's a very fair point. It is for the fan perspective. It's not great, but that also makes it more interesting because there's snowbirds. My brother and sister-in-law live in Arizona. I've got multiple friends from like my college years that live in Arizona that are from here. It's become a popular destination, and the Phoenix area is just ridiculous as far as like how many people are starting to move there because of what the weather is, and it's dry heat. And like my sister and brother-in-law love the area. So that could end up being a huge factor because all those people are already there. It's a lot easier to buy tickets when you're already there. And I think that's what makes it interesting. The other thing is, AJ, is then we'll kind of move on and talk about the actual game itself. The NFC West better than most people I know. Will there be any kind of contingent of Cardinals fans who decide that, hey, we have the Rams, they're in our division, we're going to cheer for them because they're here? Is it no? Okay, good, because that's how it should be.
I feel more strongly that there will be Cardinals fans who show up to be with the Vikings fans, more than they will be pro NFC West. Like there are always some people who are like, oh, I just want to see a division team do well, but that's like one in every like 20 fans, right? Like these fans hate each other. It's not as bad as like the NFC and the AFC North can get, right? Where these rivalries are just bitter and massive, but like nobody gets along in the NFC West either. So I wouldn't be shocked if there was a contingent of Arizona fans. I'm sure there might be some who are like sympathetic and be like, oh, we're here to support the people of LA and things like that. But by and large, there's going to be more who come out specifically to just say, you know what? The Rams are in town. I'm going to go boo them because I don't have anything else to do on a Monday night. So I'm going to go buy tickets and just absolutely cheer for them, their downfall.
Hey, listen, I would normally be cheering for the Packers' downfall, but if all 3 road teams win, the Vikings get a home playoff game. And there's a small part of me that really wants that, because let me tell you, it would be fun as hell to face the Commanders in the second round. I'd also be scared out of for my own life. But let's kind of move forward and talk about the football game. Thank you guys so much for joining us here on this delayed episode because Odie farted into my computer. AJ, I kind of want to start here. The element that we found out earlier this week when Brian Flores had his weekly press conference, they were floored when the Rams played Puka Nacua. You and I talking in real time, we were floored that the Rams played Puka Nacua in that game. So the Vikings weren't prepared for it. And especially because it was on a short week, it kind of created an interesting wrinkle that we hadn't really been able to think about before. So my question for you is, how much different is this team now with a fully healthy Puka, fully healthy Cooper Kupp, than the one that we saw back in week 8? Because short weeks always do weird things to games. And it seems like that it did one when the Vikings lost 30-20.
Yeah, so I have a numbers stat just to illustrate the difference for you. So when Puka Nacua is on the field for the LA Rams, they have a positive EPA of 0.17. When he is off the field, passing EPA drops to negative 0.03. That is a difference of a 0.23 EPA, which is the difference between the Baltimore Ravens passing offense and the New York Jets. That's the kind of stark difference we're talking about here when Puka Nacua is on the field versus when he's not. And it's really, he just opens things up more for at this stage of Cooper Kupp's career, he's not quite the same separator that he was. He's still a highly effective target, right? But age and injuries has kind of taken its toll on him. Puka opens everything up. Like he's their schemed up downfield look guy. He this year has gotten a lot better in terms of like working open and actually kind of securing the ball. A lot of the plays happen because Puka Nacua is on the field. You look at the Cardinals game. At one point before their game-winning drive, Puka had almost, I want to say, like 60% of the team's yards in the fourth quarter. It's that kind of like underrated superstar aspect of Puka Nacua. Now the offense is flowing through him. He's kind of becoming that in-house heir to Cooper Kupp. And so it's really just the schematic evolution now. Instead, going into that game, the Rams had just lost to the Bears. They just lost to the Packers. They barely scraped by the Raiders. And then in comes Puka in the first game against the Vikings, and they put up 30 points, which they hadn't done all year to that point. And so it was really just like this. You see his impact in both the box score and outside of it. And it's really just his leadership, I think, has grown. He's really become, at some points, it feels like he's the best player on the Rams offense. Which is scary to say considering how good Matthew Stafford still is at this stage of his career. But Puka has just taken a whole. He was already like one of the most productive rookies ever, and he's taken another step to his game. I really feel like now Sean McVay, now that he has really the full cache of weapons, the full stable, he's really started to unlock a little more things. And last week against Seattle, when he didn't have any of the starters, it was so fun because like Jordan Whittington, like the backup 6th round pick, would motion in from the side and then line up at fullback, and they would run play action off of that. Like this is the kind of sicko stuff that Sean McVay just does with wide receivers, and Puka Nacua just opens things up like that. It's that kind of gravity that impacts the game. Obviously, the Vikings are well familiar with that with Justin Jefferson. Right, in his ability to impact Jordan Addison and vice versa. I think Addison has worked his way up into a quality starter as well. And for the Rams now, it's the evolution of the offense is how can we get the ball into Puka Nacua's hands? And if you're taking away Puka Nacua, we still have Cooper Kupp, who's still good after the catch. He could still work open on third downs and be a valuable target. Tyler Higbee's getting back healthy. Like the Rams are kind of, sort of, maybe finding their stride here a little bit as we get closer into everybody gets healthy.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to be such an interesting thing is the Rams at the beginning of the year were probably the least healthy team of all time, and they just decided to pass that curse over to the Lions. Ironically, the two teams the Vikings have lost to this year are the Rams and the Lions. I want to kind of shift over to the defensive side of the football here for a couple minutes, because one of the things that really destroyed the Vikings in the first matchup was Jared Verse. It was basically the Jared Verse show. And he even took Christian Darrisaw to town a couple times. And obviously Darrisaw got hurt at the end of that first half. Will not be playing this game. In his place is Cam Robinson, who has been a fine replacement. But he is not Christian Darrisaw. The biggest way to defeat Cam Robinson is not to go through him. It's to take him to the inside. Has Jared Verse developed enough of that part of his game to be able to take advantage of that? Because the one thing that I remember from his film, it was either like go around the edge or I'm just going to run like a bull in a china shop and go through you.
Yeah, it's that element of power in Jared Verse's game is honestly, truthfully, kind of astonishing for a rookie. What he does to opposing tackles of putting them on skates is crazy. Brandon Thorne put out his true pressure rate, and I believe that Jared Verse was only behind Chris Jones and Myles Garrett for quality pressure rates this year.
Those aren't good players at all either. So
no, yeah, he's just two of the best. Light work, right, for a rookie. I think he's definitely grown significantly. I will be curious to see where the Rams line him up, because I honestly and truthfully wonder if they might think that O'Neal is a better matchup for Jared Verse, because O'Neal is a gifted tackle, but he's not got the best play strength in the world, right? That's been a knock of his since he came out of the draft. And the Vikings do like to run to the right. I think about 45% of their runs over the last several weeks has been to that right side. I wonder if they're going to say, hey, if Jared Verse can hold the edge a little bit more on that side versus O'Neal, and can kind of go through O'Neal with his play strength and his power. Because O'Neal is a savvy vet, and that's made him a top, I would say, 3 right tackle. But he's still, he's still not the most powerful guy out there. You could still lose to power rushers, and Jared Verse is elite power rusher. I would say one of the best in the NFL at converting speed to power, going through your chest. And then on the flip side, letting Byron Young work through Cam Robinson, right? Get around Cam Robinson. You kind of be that explosive pass rusher who works inside out. The more, I would say, more well-rounded athlete of the two would be Byron Young, just in terms of what he can do. But it's really an interesting matchup. I'm sure the Rams will attack both, and so they will, not to give away any tendencies or things like that. But if you're the Rams, I feel like you like your matchup. I mean, obviously Jared Verse is elite, but Byron Young has come on really strong as well.
I think that's a really interesting point to kind of loop everything together, because I think you're right. Brian O'Neill is like probably a top 3 right tackle in football, and he may never make the Pro Bowl again just because of who else is in his conference. Like,
yeah,
this dude's been playing at a Pro Bowl level for years, and nobody notices him because he's in the same conference as Lane Johnson, Penei Sewell, Trent Williams. Like, sorry, dudes. And it's
it's unfortunate because he's awesome, right? One of the most savvy vet, like elite athlete who is able to overcome his play strength concerns and develop into one of the top at his position. It just doesn't matter because Penei Sewell and Lane Johnson are two of the most dominant athletes in the sport.
Yeah, it's just an absolutely bonkers thing to think about. Let's kind of talk a little bit about the Vikings. Everybody watched the game against the Detroit Lions on Sunday. And one of the interesting things about said game was Sam Darnold kind of had a little bit of a clunker. But the one thing that I found interesting kind of watching the back of the film, and everybody can check this out in AZ Sports, I wrote about 1,300 words on it, was his process was pretty good. His throws were bad. And for what we saw this season, they were egregiously bad. He was missing by like 6 inches to a foot consistently, where guys just could not get the football. And just if 3 of those are different, this is a 1-score game. And that could completely change everything. And that's why the old adage, football is a game of inches. What did you take from Sam Darnold's performance? Are you kind of on the side where, hey, he had good process, but things just didn't work? Or are you really concerned about where things are at with him?
Yeah, I don't know if this is necessarily an indictment on Sam Darnold, right? There were a lot of takes of like, oh, this is why they drafted JJ McCarthy. This is that. And I don't know if it's necessarily a referendum on his whole season, but it's kind of who Sam Darnold is, right? He's always been a little bit more of a not necessarily precise passer. I do definitely think, I wonder if the environment might have just amped him up a little too much. There's so many factors that can go into when you're missing consistently by a hair. It could be any different number of things at a time. And Sam Darnold has grown, and I think Kevin O'Connell has done a lot to give him as many answers as he can in terms of the read of the play and things like that. And so I don't necessarily know if I would say I'm concerned about it for Sam Darnold, more just because I think this was, Sam Darnold, like had games like this before, and it hadn't ultimately mattered because the Vikings, had the defense stepped up and made a play, or Justin Jefferson made a catch that didn't happen this time around, right? Like different factors like that. I feel like it was just more of a standard Sam Darnold game, and it just ultimately, because of the stakes of it all, just got heightened to the nth degree.
Yeah, I think that's a part of it too. And I saw some NFL players kind of talking about it, like former quarterbacks and stuff. They're just like, he's pressing, and that's why everything's going high. He's like too amped up for this. And it ended up being honestly the biggest factor, because they didn't turn the ball over unless you count the 4th downs, which aren't technically considered turnovers by NFL statistical standards. They didn't turn the ball over. They forced 2, and it felt like a game that early on that the Vikings could win. It felt like a war. And then all of a sudden the Lions took over. But are you concerned at all that Darnold might be able to carve up that Rams secondary? Because there aren't studs in the Rams secondary. There are good players, but they're not household names like we've been used to in the past.
Yes and no. I think part of it, the Rams defense over the last half of the season, aside from Buffalo, because Buffalo scores on everybody, has played some really strong games. I think, especially the last 3 weeks, because the defense has been the reason why the team won. They clinched the Jets, beat the Cardinals, beat the 49ers because of the defensive performance. I don't know if it's necessarily a concern about the secondary, as I am concerned about how Kevin O'Connell is going to make absolute mincemeat of the linebacker room. The Omar Speights has been an undrafted free agent linebacker that the Rams has come on strong, but the Rams ideally like to use him on early downs. His emergence has been a big reason why the run defense has improved so much early. But like I said, they like to keep him in on early downs. They don't play him a whole lot on passing situations. They ideally try not to. So on the flip side of that, the Vikings will absolutely take advantage of a guy if they think that he's just a 2-down linebacker who all of a sudden has to match up with any one of their players out in space. And that's been an area that the Rams defense has struggled in, is tackling out in space and things like that. And so the quick hitters, I think, are going to be interesting. Like if the Rams can shore up some of the tackling woes and hit in space. That'll be a thing. But the secondary has gotten a lot stronger because of I think the emergence of the third round pick Cam Kinchens. He's come on really strong at the end of the season and lets them get back to what they were doing a little bit more under Staley, where they were able to do the light boxes with two high safeties. I think they're like fourth in two high looks in the NFL this year. I think my concern about the Rams game versus what the Lions did is the Lions are much more aggressive in nature, right? I mean, the Lions will throw the kitchen sink, the refrigerator, the microwave, the coffee maker at you, right? They'll throw everything at you. The Rams really aren't, right? And I think they're like 30th in blitz rate this year, right? Like, they're just more content to rush four, rush three, rush four guys, and just kind of let the rookies and the young guys up front on the defensive line wreck your game plan. But if you're an offensive coordinator, you can kind of take advantage of that in some ways versus instead of the blitz, because it's psychologically, if you are a quarterback, it's like, okay, I know that on any given play, there's like a 65%, 70% likelihood that they're going to send 5 or 6 rushers, and I'm going to have to get this ball out quick. And so you're naturally more juiced up versus, okay, well, I know they only blitz maybe 20% of the time. It's a different kind of warfare, I think, for a quarterback. And so if you're Sam Darnold, if the offensive line can give him time, I think he's going to have success. Now, the issue is good luck blocking the Rams defensive line, because they're like 6 guys deep and they're all very good. And so I think that's where this matchup is ultimately going to decide on how Kevin O'Connell and Sam Darnold can limit that pass rush.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about kind of Sam Darnold and being able to mitigate that pass rush. And the one thing that I noticed with how the Lions attacked the Vikings was they just tried to push the line back. And they tried to, because they didn't really have a dude who could loop. They didn't have a dude who could get around a tackle. So they're just like, all right, we'll just go through you. And one of the big things that Darnold has been able to do is slide in the pocket. Do the Tom Brady and Ben Roethlisberger where, hey, this gap is opening up. I'm going to slide in there, create a throwing window, and then fire it downfield. He's done it all year, and he's done it at an incredibly high level. Do the Rams have the ability to do that? Because we've joked around about it where this defensive line is like, oops, all 3 techs. Do they have dudes that can push this offensive line around other than Jared Verse?
Not totally. They will be able to attack the inside because of the games that they'll run up front. Instead of, like the Lions, all their defensive linemen are huge, right? We're talking 270, 280 pound plus guys. Right, with good at least play strength or better. The Rams are more like very good athletes, but it doesn't necessarily matter in terms of like pushing the pocket when the Rams will be able to stack a game behind, like passing off a looper and things like that. If you are a split second too late, not even like a millisecond too late in picking up Byron Young looping around or Braden Fisk looping around, you coming around the side. If you're just a split second late on that miscommunication and handling off and things like that, he's going to affect the quarterback. And especially Darnold has this issue. Jared Goff has this issue. A few other quarterbacks have the issue of pressure in their face, and that could kind of speed up the process. I wouldn't necessarily be shocked if the Rams dial that specific part up. But in terms of like, do they have the guys to control the line of scrimmage? I don't necessarily think so. Not in the same vein that the Detroit Lions do and a couple of other teams that the Vikings might play in the playoffs.
And I think that's going to be really interesting to watch. The other thing, when it comes to pressure on the quarterback, Matthew Stafford why is he so good against the blitz? What is it about how Stafford plays? Because that was one thing. He cooked the Vikings when it came to the blitz, and then they couldn't get any pass rush against that offensive line, which floored me among other people because of how poorly that unit had played up to that point. Like, why is Stafford just so good when pressure's in his face?
I think part of it, there's a quote from Matthew Stafford several years ago, but it's really, he said, when they blitz, it brings an opportunity. And I think that Stafford at this stage of his career is one of the best processors in the NFL. I think that, coupled with his natural aggression in terms of trying to make every throw happen, and he still has the arm talent to do so, with that chemistry with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. I mean, I think of the Patriots, the game plan this season. I think the Patriots blitzed Matthew Stafford on like 70% of dropbacks, and he diced them up for like 200 some yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, it was just absurd amounts of like there was a joke being passed around because it was like the timing. The broadcasters had just talked about the Stafford, how good he was versus the blitz, and they showed a graphic, and then the very next play or a couple plays later, the Patriots send 7 and Matthew Stafford throws a deep bomb to Cooper Kupp, who basically walks in for a touchdown. And I just think that kind of aggression, that to recognize that it's opportunity, because a lot of quarterbacks, we've joked about this, a lot of quarterbacks now are content to like, oh, they're bringing 7, check down. Oh, here's my tight end and a little out route. Here are my outlet plays. And Stafford is like, oh, they're bringing a blitz. That must mean somebody's one-on-one. I'm just going to chuck it deep like a trebuchet, and somebody's going to come down with it, right? Sometimes it bites him. Sometimes it works out for a touchdown. But I think that kind of aggressive mindset really opens things up. And when you have the protection that the Rams had last time, and in this matchup, the offensive line is healthy in this go around again. And so when you can have that kind of trust, your receivers are fully healthy, you're kind of clicking, and you know that somebody is has a one-on-one opportunity, Stafford is going to take advantage of that. And I wonder how the Vikings will adjust from that going into this. Are they going to say, hey, we need to dial it up even more from last time, or if they're going to end up dialing it back in the sense and trying to play more coverage and hoping that Grenard and Van Ginkel and Dallas Turner can win up front and create enough pressure on Stafford to rush him without having to send 5, 6, 7 rushers.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really interesting because one of the things, all credit to Luke Braun, who kind of pointed this out, because it wasn't something I necessarily linked together. I think the blitz rates for the Vikings are kind of skewed. And I talked about this in our group chat earlier, because a blitz is considered 5 or more pass rushers. The Vikings base is pretty much 5 pass rushers. So how much are they really blitzing when that's just their standard? And I think that's what makes it very interesting. I would have to try and see if I could find blitz rates where they're just doing 6 or more, because I think then that's the real number that you're looking at, just because of how Flores wants to play. He wants to continue to send pressure, but that also leaves your back end a little bit, weaker, for lack of a better term. So I'm going to be intrigued to see how he handles that with Stafford, because if they can get pressure with 4, this defense feels, for lack of a better term, it feels unstoppable. But if you can block 4, if you can block 5, they're pretty easy to beat. That's kind of the key. If you allow pressure, Vikings get pressure, you're toast. If you stop it, you win. That's kind of been the thing all year, and Stafford's ability to kind of maneuver that I think could be the biggest key to this game.
Yeah, especially in a game that is probably going to be pretty tightly contested. It's going to come down to winning in the margins, right? Like, how well are you on third down? I think both of these teams, how well you're doing in the red zone, because both of these teams have struggled in the red zone throughout the year, and both of these defenses are really good red zone defenses. And so, how you win in the margins of these things, I think is going to matter a lot in this one. I looked it up, Tyler, on SIS for 6+ rushers. The Vikings are second in pressures on 6+ man rushers, just behind the Steelers.
All right.
Uh,
Well, I mean, heck,
they're tied
when you
with
have TJ
they're
Watt,
tied ironically with the Lions.
wait, you know what? When you have TJ Watt, you have to send 6 guys. That's how it works. That's how it works.
Yeah. Somebody's got to get all the attention so TJ Watt can get the running back chip.
There you go. Bingo. AJ, I think we're going to wrap this up here pretty quick. I'm going to ask you for a prediction, but if you're not ready to fully kind of commit either way, what I want is, at minimum, what's your confidence level in this Rams team going in? Because you know significantly more about them than we do here. And then from counter perspective, I want your confidence in the Vikings, because unlike myself, who covers the team full time, we're kind of on equal footing there, where you are a little bit more of an outsider like I am with the Rams. Kind of, where are you sitting with these teams?
Man, it's tough because it's like, which version of the Rams are you going to get? You know, like the Rams have really offensively have really kind of limped to the end of the year. Out like after the Buffalo game, they scored I think like 12 points, 13 and 19 points. But then on the flip side, they put up 44 on Buffalo, who's a pretty good daggum team. Which Rams team are you gonna get? That's my issue with them. And so I want to put my confidence, I'll put it on a scale of 1 to 10. I'll put it at a 7. Just because like I still believe in the talent of the team and the playoff experience, especially on offense, and McVay, I think, will be a significant factor in this. They've been here multiple times. They know the routine. They're used to it. They're ready to go. But also on the flip side, the Vikings are a pretty damn good team, right? Like they're well coached on both sides of the ball. They're talented everywhere. They are so well schemed, and they've been by and large really good at the things that the Rams necessarily haven't been. The Rams have really struggled to like with a lot of slow starts, and I think at one they haven't scored a first quarter touchdown in like 11 or 12 games this season, which is absurd. And the Vikings can start hot, right? Like they're fired up, ready to go immediately. And so I feel like I have a little bit more confidence in the Vikings overall, just because, I mean, they've won 14 games. That's hard to do. In the NFL, it's hard to do. But on the flip side, the Rams beat them already. You know, it's hard to beat a team twice. I still ultimately think that the Rams matchups work out favorably for them to win this game. Would either result necessarily surprise me? No. I think the only thing that would surprise me if it was a blowout, or if it was just like hot like this, like it was last time, where it just felt like the Rams just totally shook the Vikings. You know, I wouldn't necessarily expect that same thing to happen. I think the Vikings will be a little bit more prepared now. I don't see either team blowing them out. I think this one will be a pretty close game. It's so ultimately at the end of the day, I'll pick the Rams. I think the Rams can eke out a win here on this one. But would it be a little bit closer than the last one? Yeah, I feel extremely confident in that happening.
I think the one thing that's going to be really interesting as far as a difference in this game versus the first game is it's not 4 days of rest. This is going to be, you have a full week to prepare. There is no short week syndrome. And we all know that Thursday night games get really weird and really fluky. And that is not to say that the Rams win was fluky. I don't believe it was. But things are different when you are playing on 4 days of rest versus a full week. And I think that element is going to be very intriguing with how this game ends up going, because you give Brian Flores and Kevin O'Connell a full 8 days to prepare, I think it's going to be a much more electric and explosive game plan. On the flip side, I also think you're going to get that from Sean McVay. I'm less confident in Chris Shula, but I also don't think he's incapable. He's not Brandon Staley. So I'm very intrigued to see how this matchup ends up playing out. Then, as you said, I think the only thing that would shock me is one team is a total catastrophe. I think this is going to be a very good game. I think at most we're going to be looking at a 10 or 11 point win for one team. And it'll probably end up being a 1-score game because these are both very worthy teams for making the playoffs. And for a 4-5 matchup with a 14-win team, I think the Rams might be one of the better 4 seeds that you'll ever see in this situation.
I want to ask you, Tyler, because I said this take earlier, but I said I feel like it's like the best wild card matchup we've had in quite a few years. I could just be totally forgetting somebody because I'm forgetful, but it really just feels like with these two teams, the connections between them, the energy, and the way that both of these teams are with elite offensive minds, talented defenses, it feels like it's the best wild card matchup of this slate for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels like it's also the best one that we've had in quite a while.
The only one that I can think of different than, I'm going to pass it off to Dave here, is 2 years ago, Monday Night Football, Dallas and Tampa Bay, where Dallas went into Tampa and just smoked them. But the matchup going into the game was a fantastic one. And people thought that this might be Tom Brady's last hurrah, which it ended up being. But the last hurrah aspect, people thought that Tampa Bay team might go to the Super Bowl. So for that game to end like it did and just be a complete and utter domination was fascinating in itself. But I think that might be the last one where it actually felt like, hey, this is a great football game. Eagles-Packers is a pretty good one, but the Packers just lost Christian Watson. They can't get out of their own way for anything right now. And Jalen Hurts is in the concussion protocol, so some of that cachet that you might have had earlier just isn't there right now. Dave, go ahead.
You're talking Eagles-Packers. You also have Jordan Love with the elbow injury that he sustained last week. I think this one is the best, like AJ said.
Yeah, like I could see an argument for Commanders Bucks. I feel like as the next best just because of the two offenses, right? And they've already played each other once this year. How's the revenge factor going to come in? But just with all the storylines, I feel like this one just like there's such a different energy about it. Maybe it's just because it's on Monday night, and Monday night games are always, I think, like the most energized of the week. But it feels like this game just has so much league wide attention. Like it's dominating the waves.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fun one. And the fact that we have to wait till Monday night is very annoying, but it also means that we can plan ahead. One of our teams will be playing a week from Sunday. There's not going to be, will they play Saturday? Will they play Sunday? It will be a Sunday game. And I think that is a good thing to plan. And of course, shout out Houston Texans, who have only ever played a wild card game at 3:30 Central Time on Saturday afternoon. They should just rename that the Houston Texans time slot. I just think that's hilarious. AJ, thank you for your patience tonight with our OD difficulties with his tooting and joining us here at 6:30 instead of 6. Where can the people find you? And I know you have some really good stuff that you've cooked up.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at AJ Schulte FB. On my content is also on A to Z Sports with Tyler. You just go to teams. You can hit Oklahoma. You can hit Michigan. You can hit NFL Draft. I'm doing a lot there, but also just today I've put out a Rising Quarterbacks quarterback coach article, and 2 Vikings coaches, 2, not just 1, 2, made it onto the list, and there will be quite a few more Vikings coaches coming up in future pieces that I will be releasing throughout the week. So stay tuned for that.
It's going to be a lot of fun. There isn't anybody better in the world with knowing who the best up-and-coming coaches are, so you'll want to check that out. Dave, what do we have coming up?
We have tomorrow Sal Spice and Scolders and Spice. She'll have a Thursday show, and then Saturday we have myself and Darren Campbell on Two Old Bloggers as we discuss this Rams game.
It's going to be a great week, and there might just be some bonus Real Forno Show content, so you'll want to keep an eye out. And for nights like tonight, when you have those unexpected technical difficulties, this is why we always say subscribe and ring the bell so it tells you when we're going live, just in case things don't happen the way we plan. Thank you guys so much for joining. Thank you if you're listening on the podcast feed, 5 stars, all those fun things, please and thank you. It's a free way to help us out. I'm Tyler. He's AJ. He's Dave. SKOL Vikings.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Forness and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching The Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone!